And now back to your regularly scheduled program.
So after a much needed about 2-week vacation, I mean, I did have a couple live streams in between those times, but I will say I definitely needed some time off, but I am back ready to dive into a lot of new content with you guys. A lot of big releases coming out here in the fall time, but this bottle seems to be the new it bottle that everyone's talking about. So today we're talking about the new Elijah Craig Toasted Rye Kentucky Straight Rye Whiskey, which continues Elijah Craig's commitment of barrel innovation. Now, I've never been a huge fan of toasted whiskeys personally, probably because there are so many out there right now and so few of them really hit my palate just because there are so many of them out there. It's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of like Amburana. Like everyone's done Amburana, everyone's doing toasted. However, toasted ryes, I think, hit me more often than toasted bourbons do. So let's see how this one holds up right now. Welcome back, it's the Mash and Drum. What's up, folks? I'm Jason C, and welcome back to the Mash and Drum. Like, subscribe, and help me keep climbing to that 100,000 subscriber milestone here in 2024. Appreciate the support. So let's talk about the process of how this one is made, and which may be a little bit different than some other toasted rye whiskeys on the market. So in this bottle, we have fully matured Elijah Craig Straight Rye Whiskey, which is usually, I mean, it's non-age stated, but folks that I've talked to know it's older than Pikesville is. Now, Pikesville's 6 years old, so this is at least 7, so we know that. Now, that whiskey is then dumped and then re-entered at barrel proof into a second custom toasted new oak barrel designed in partnership with Independent Stave Company. Now, according to the press release, the toast on these secondary barrels is unique to Elijah Craig Toasted Rye because at the end of the nearly hour-long toasting process, a cap is placed on the barrel to quickly ramp up the heat to an extremely high temperature, allowing phenols to embed in the surface of the barrel for an added element of smoke to complement the spice and sweetness of the rye. Also, a little fun fact, unlike many other finished whiskeys, this whiskey retains its status as a Kentucky Straight Rye Whiskey because the second finishing barrel is both new and charred. So final details for this one, Elijah Craig Toasted Rye is a mash bill of 51% rye, 35% corn, and 14% malted barley. Each bottle has this dark green label with the Toasted Rye designation featured at the top of the label, and apparently this is also a very highly allocated release. It's bottled at 94 proof and is available now nationally at a suggested retail price of about $54.99. So interestingly enough, this comes about 4 years after the launch of Elijah Craig Toasted Barrel Bourbon, which was the same price at about $54.99. This bottle I don't believe is allocated anymore. I can actually, in fact, walk down the street, go to a local store of mine, and that is sitting on the shelf. So time will tell if this happens with the Toasted Rye, but let's dive into the rye and see if this Toasted Rye, I don't know, keeps me interested. Here we go. The first thing that jumps out of the glass is it does carry a very heavy sweetness to me. Now, the one thing I'm not getting in this glass that I generally get in some toasted bourbons and ryes that I dislike is that bitter oaky note that I sometimes pick up, but I'm not getting that in this at all, which keeps me hopeful here. It's also very chocolatey to me. I'm not really picking up any really dark fruit at all, but it's very dark, very sweet, kind of what you want your toasted whiskeys to be. So let's give it a try. Here we go. So first thing that strikes me that I like is that it tastes like a rye whiskey. Sometimes that toasted barrel can really overtake the rye grain and the rye spice with a very heavy sweetness. This comes off like a rye. It does complement it rather nicely. It doesn't really overtake it. It's not overly sweet to me. But yeah, the first thing that hits you is just a lot of black pepper, that rye spiciness. Again, a good amount of that milk chocolate that I was getting on the nose is definitely kind of coming through into the palate here. So second sip at 94 proof is where it does seem to level out quite a bit. I feel like I'm getting some of the citrus that's starting to pull through from the rye grain. So it's kind of a mix of orange and chocolate together. I think the star of the show here is the mid palate. While the finish is okay, it doesn't have a super long finish. You're not really gonna get that with 94 proof, but it does give you a nice little lingering pepperiness, I think, on the back end of it. Also, some of those baking spices come through, maybe a little clove, a little cinnamon there on the back end as well. Third sip, I got a hint of a smokiness to it. So a little bit of that barrel char from that toasting process coming through. So now all the flavors I'm talking about are, you know, maybe slightly smoked. A smoked chocolate, smoked orange peel. I actually like the addition of the smoke. It just gives it another level of complexity that I wasn't expecting. Front of the palate, rye spice, a lot of sweetness there. Mid palate is where I think this whiskey really shines. You get the rye spice, you get some baking spice, but orange chocolate, little hint of smoke, all come into play. It's very sweet, a little bit of that marshmallow note. And then the back end is kind of nice and easy, just a little bit of a black pepper spice there. It's pretty good. Let's compare it to the toasted bourbon and see which one I like more. And I also want to compare it to the Sagamore Double Oaked Rye. All right, so let's dive into this quick comparison. First, I want to go over the Elijah Craig Bourbon versus the Rye. Let's see what we got here. I definitely like the nose on the Rye a little bit better. It's not as bright as the bourbon. Again, with this Elijah Craig toasted bourbon, I was getting some of those kind of bitter characteristic that kind of turns me off from toasted bourbons. But let's try the toasted bourbon. It's been a while since I've had this. Yeah, and that's what I was afraid of. You know, to be honest, I do have to try some of the newer batches. Maybe I'll grab a newer bottle of this, see if it's improved. But that tannic, almost acidic type of toasted influence I get on this Elijah Craig toasted bourbon is what turns me off with a lot of toasted bourbons in the market. Let's go back to the Rye. I like the Rye a lot better. Way better, actually. I think the Elijah Craig toasted Rye is a far superior product to the bourbon, at least right now. It's much more integrated. Again, this just goes to my point where I think ryes just do better with certain finishes over bourbons. Bourbons is already inherently sweet, so you're just trying to make something sweeter, which I don't really think it needs. I know a lot of people like that, the sweeter the better. But for me, I really look for balance, and I think the toasted rye has a lot more balance than the bourbon does. But is the rye better than the Sagamore Double Oaked Rye? Wow, the Sagamore gives me, I think, a little bit more. And remember, you have some 95.5 rye in the Sagamore, so it's a little bit more of a different type of rye flavor that you get. However, man, I don't know, the Sagamore just comes through with a little bit more of kind of like a chocolate covered cherry on the Sagamore with a lot of toasted oak. Let me give it a try here. Now the Sagamore Sagamore Double Oaked is good. Sagamore Double Oaked is not that far off in the proof department. It's only 90, what is this one? 96.6. So you're only looking at 2.6 proof points higher than the Elijah Craig. Yeah, I like the Double Oaked on the Sagamore. Definitely a little bit better. It just adds a little bit more oomph. I like the balance, the flavors. I think there's a little bit more going on. However, it doesn't really make the Elijah Craig toasted barrel rye bad. It doesn't make it exceptional. However, I think it's a really nice release. Now, I will say I like the toasted rye from Elijah Craig over the toasted bourbon, but let's go to final breakdown and let me hash this out. All right, final breakdown for the Elijah Craig toasted rye whiskey, brand new from Elijah Craig. Price for this one, you're looking at $54.99. I have seen a couple of these on secondary going for about double the price, about $100. As far as availability, it does say highly allocated. However, it's Heaven Hill, it's Elijah Craig. There should be a lot of these out in the market, but it's still gonna be limited. Value for this one, I'm gonna say the value for this one is above average. At $54.99, I actually think it's a decent price point for a toasted rye whiskey. Generally, you see toasted rye whiskeys above $60, usually above $70, $75. So for $54.99, I thought Heaven Hill brought this out at a competitive price point. Most I paid for this one, considering the other toasted ryes that are on the market, I would probably not go over retail for this. I think $54.99. If I did want to get another one of these, that's exactly what I'm going to pay for it. As far as alternatives go, you have the Penelope Toasted Rye, which I need to compare to this one to see how that compares, but I think I feel like I would like the Penelope a little bit better than this as well. You have K. Luke that does a toasted rye. You have Buzzard's Roost that also has a toasted rye whiskey. And then you have Michter's that has their pretty popular toasted barrel finish rye, but that's pretty hard to get. But on top of all that, you do have the Sagamore Double Oaked Rye, which isn't exactly toasted, but I really put that as probably the best alternative to this as far as price and as far as availability. And as far as recommended, just say skip a try before you buy or buy and back it up. I don't know. There's really nothing exceptional about this whiskey, but there's really nothing wrong with it either. I think it's a really good, solid toasted rye whiskey from Elijah Craig at a good, affordable price. If anything, I think the price helps it for me. So let me attack it this way. If it was me, I'd probably just try before I buy, which was you know, I kind of wish I tried this before I bought it. But if it's your first time being introduced to a toasted rye whiskey, I think there's no better choice than trying this one. The price is good, it tastes great, it's sweet, it's not overly toasted, it's got a great bounce to it, it's not too rye heavy. Maybe I'll just go with that. If it's your first time trying a toasted rye whiskey, I think you should buy it and try it out, because I think it's a really good representation. But if you're a more seasoned drinker and you like some of those higher proof toasted rye whiskeys that are out there, then this is probably more of a try before you buy. All right, guys, well, hope you enjoyed this review for the new Elijah Craig Toasted Rye Whiskey. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit that subscribe button below. Please hit that like button. And if you haven't yet, follow me on Instagram. Let me know down in the comments if you've been able to grab one of these, what you think of it. And as I always say, it's not about the whiskey, it's the people you share with. Cheers. It is good to be back. A lot more content coming, guys, so strap in. Cheers, guys.